slip knot and chain 7. Once you get 7 chains, now single crochet into the second chain from the hook and continue making single crochet into each chain all the way until the end. Once you come at the end, chain 1 and turn your work. For the next row, we are going to work into back loops only. So start making a single crochet into this very first stitch from the hook, but only into the back loop, and continue making single crochet into each stitch back loop all the way until the end. Into this last stitch, make a single crochet into both loops and just repeat that all the way until we have about 28 rows. Just continue working into each stitch back loop all the way until the end, and remember into this last stitch always grab both loops and just continue doing that until you have a total of 28 rows. I'll meet you once I get 28 rows. Once you get 28 rows, whereas I've counted them like this, 1 2 3 4 5 6 until 28. So now to start working across the ribbing panel, we are now going to switch to a different hook, which is bigger than the one we previously used. Now make a single crochet across here by starting with this very first stitch from the hook all the way like this until the end. And just make sure you are placing 2 single crochet in each row. To have a total of 56 stitches end of this ribbing panel. So just repeat that all the way until the end here. At the end here, just chain 1 and turn your work. For the next row, we are going to make half double crochet slip stitch. Yarn over, insert the hook into this very first stitch from the hook, yarn over, pull through 3 loops on the hook. Instead of yarning over, just slip stitch by pulling through all these 2 loops like this. Yarn over again, insert the hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through 3 loops on the hook and just slip stitch like this. And just continue doing that all the way until the end. At the end, chain 1 and turn your work. Now you must repeat this same process until your project measures about 8 inches long, including the ribbing panel. So I'll meet you once my project measures about 8 inches long, including the ribbing panel. Okay, for the next step, we are going to cut off the yarn and start decreasing. To decrease, count 7 stitches from each end and mark the 7th stitch. And do the same on the other side. For the next step, make a slip knot. Insert the hook and start working from this marked stitch. Make a slip stitch and make half double crochet slip stitch in this very same stitch you have made a slip stitch. Then remove the stitch marker and just continue doing that the same way we had been working on here until you reach this stitch with a stitch marker. At the end here, just chain 1 and turn your work. Now just repeat the same thing by doing the same thing all the way until this last stitch here, because now we are only going to work here. For this part that we have left over here, these are our armholes. So now just continue working across here until this part measures about 9 inches long. Okay, I'm done with the back panel and this is how it looks like. This part measures exactly 9 inches long and this part measures 10 inches long, so the total thing it measures about 19 inches including the ribbing panel. So for the front panel, just go ahead and do the same thing you have done for the back panel. The first part must measure exactly 10 inches like for the back panel like this, and to decrease just do the same thing by counting the 7 stitches from these sides as well as on the other side. Okay, for the front panel, after we have worked 9 inches long like the back panel, so we have just folded our project like this. Actually, let me say I have just folded my project like this and mark the middle stitch, which is it's a 30th stitch from here. Like for the front panel, still again to count from this stitch until here, mark the 7th stitch. Then from here, count this as the first stitch all the way until you reach the 30th here, then mark it. So this should be the middle stitch, and just go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. So that's what I have done. So to continue by decreasing, I have started working from the middle stitch here all the way until the 30th stitch here, all the way until my project measures about 7.5, let me say 7.5 inches long. Then from there I started decreasing, like you can see how I have decreased. So this side I've done it off camera, but the other side I'm going to do it on camera to show you how I have done the other side. So let's just begin. Make a slip knot, insert the hook, and start working from the next stitch, not the one you have previously worked for the other side, but the next stitch. Just turn your work like this and insert the hook into the next stitch in this one. Join with a slip stitch and just pull your yarn to be a little bit tight like that, and just do the same pattern, half double crochet, slip stitch, and just continue making that same pattern until you reach that marked stitch, which is this one. Continue doing that until you reach this stitch with a stitch marker. Just remove the stitch marker and make the last half double crochet slip stitch in that same stitch you have removed the stitch marker. Chain 1 and turn your work. Now just repeat that all the way until you reach this first stitch that you have done here, and just continue doing that until this decreased part. Let me just put it down like this. Just continue doing that until this decreased part measures about 7.5 inches long, or let me say you can continue doing that until this part measures exactly 7.5 inches long. Then I'll meet you to show you the next step, how I have decreased my project to look like this. Mark the 4th stitch to decrease. Slip stitch into this marked stitch. Chain 1 and turn your work. Next, skip this stitch that we have made a slip stitch and count 3 and mark the 3rd stitch. And slip stitch into this next 3 stitches. Remove the stitch marker and make the last slip stitch in there. Now continue making the same pattern you have been working on all the way until the end, but keep marking this first normal half double crochet slip stitch for you to know which one will be your last stitch when turning. At the end here, just chain 1 as usual and turn your work. Continue doing that and count like 1, 2, 3 until this 3rd stitch, then slip stitch into this 3rd stitch. Chain 1 and turn your work. Next, make slip stitches into this first 3 stitches. So just continue doing that all the way until the end, until this project, this entire project is equal to the back panel. Once you put them down flat like this, they must be all equal. So just continue decreasing like that until this part is equal to the other part. Next step, we are going to work across here at the V part, this side, this part. So let's just begin, and make sure the wrong side is the one that's facing you and the right side is facing down. So just flip your work like this, grab the yarn and make a slip knot, insert the hook into this very first stitch where you have started with your decrease part, and make single crochet into that very same stitch you have made the slip stitch, and just continue making single crochet into each stitch all the way up until you reach this part here before the first row of decrease. Just continue making single crochet across here until you reach this first part of decrease. Once you come at the end here, just chain 1 and turn your work. Next we are going to make a ribbing panel across here. So now, do not chain 1, just turn your work without chaining 1 and chain 5. Now make a single crochet into the second chain from the hook and continue making single crochet into each chain all the way until at the base of this chain. Make sure you have 4 stitches. Okay, now slip stitch into the next stitch, this one. Slip stitch into the next stitch as well. Chain 1 and turn your work. Now make a single crochet into the first stitch of the chain, of this part you have just made. Make a single crochet into the back loop of the first stitch and continue making single crochet into each stitch back loop all the way up. Into this last stitch, grab both loops, chain 1 and turn your work. Next, just repeat the same thing you have been doing. Start making single crochet into this very first stitch from the hook, but only into the back loop, and just continue doing that all the way until the end. And just maintain those 4 stitches. Do not try to add one more stitch or decrease. Once you get your 4 stitches, now slip stitch into this first stitch here and slip stitch into the next stitch as well, and that's all we are going to do for this entire part. So just continue doing that all the way until you come here at the end. Once you are done making the ribbing panel for this side, so just go ahead and do the same thing on this side. So since I have ended here, do not cut off the yarn, or you can cut off the yarn and start fresh from this stitch, or you can just continue making a single crochet from this very first stitch here and across all the way until up here, and come back again making the ribbing panel the same way you have done on this side. So just go ahead and do that, whatever you prefer, so long as you are going to create the same thing you have done on this side all the way. Then once you are done with this part, I'll make sure to show you the next step. So basically for the next step that I'm talking about, it's actually to join these 2 parts together, the front panel and the back panel together. So just make sure that like right side are facing each other and wrong side are facing, one must be facing up and the other one must be facing down. So just go ahead and do like that. After you're done with this part, join your panels like this by sewing. When you're going to join them, so just join them like with a yarn needle from this part all the way across until here, as well as on the other side, but only you must only end here. You do not come till over here, just end till here on both sides. Just go ahead and do that, then I'll show you how I'll be doing my armholes. Have done already mine. So the next step, what you are going to do, you are now going to start working on our armholes. To do so, we are just going to do actually something similar to the way we have done our neck part. So just go ahead and make a slip knot and start working across. Just make a slip knot and make sure the wrong side is the one that's out, the right side must be in. So insert the hook in any stitch of your choice, join with a slip stitch, and you can either start off working single crochet across, or you can just start chaining, making the ribbing panel. But in my case, I prefer making the single crochet first, just to have that straight foundation. So just go ahead and making single crochet into each stitch all the way across here until you come here. So once you come here, just slip stitch and chain 5 and do the same thing you have done for the neck part here. For the neckline, we are going to do the same thing we have done for the armholes and for the neck part when we have formed this V shape. So next what we are going to do, just make a slip knot and make a single crochet across here all the way until this last stitch here. Once you are done making single crochet across your neckline like this, you can chain whatever number of chains. It's actually depending how wide or how big your collar you want them to be. If you want your collars to be big, then you must chain more chains for your ribbing panel. If you want them to be small, you can only make few number of chains. First I have said you can chain 15, but now since I'm using a different smaller hook, so I can add 5 more chains and chain up to 20 chains, which will be enough for my collar. But if you want a bigger collar, you can add more chains. And just do the same thing you have done for the armholes and for the V shape, which is this one. And before you start chaining and make your ribbing panel, you must always, your work was like this, so just turn your work like this without chaining and start making your chains for your ribbing panel, and just go ahead all the way until this last stitch here.